Hello, people. Welcome, welcome. Let's see. Everybody is filing in, and it is exactly 7 o'clock, so I hope to get some extra credit points for that. I do have one little other thing I need to do here before I forget. That right there. And here we go. Folks, welcome to tonight's Hump Day Hanger presentation, sponsored by supercub.org and the Not So Straight and Level podcast. I'm Steve Johnson, as most of you know. Speaking of supercub.org, I want to start and talk just a minute about the 2021 Super Cub calendar. Many of you have seen the calendars that we've been producing since I think either 2003 or 2004. And these calendars are made up of all these great user submitted photographs that people send us throughout the year. And we are now just a little over a month away from the deadline for having those photos sent in. We'd love to have your great photo in our calendar. We collect a whole bunch of pictures, and then in early October, we decide which pictures we're going to put in the calendar. 60 photos make it in the calendar, 12 big photos, and then there's some little photos that go along in the month. And that's part of our annual membership drive program. So if you have some great shots, Super Cubs, even other airplanes from around the world, we'd love to see them. So it's really easy to submit photos for the Super Cub calendar. All you have to go to the supercub.org homepage. There is a link. It's actually a banner on there that says 2021 Super Cub calendar photo submission. I did it that way so you'd know what it was. And you click that, and that will take you to the photo submission link. And just remember, you want to have the photographer's permission or be the photographer to submit a photo in for us, because we want to make sure people get the right credit. And speaking of credit, I want to thank all of our supporting advertisers and members who keep supercub.org going. Sorry, I was interrupted. That keeps supercub.org going and keeps these kinds of presentations coming. And you can be a part of supporting supercub.org, and we greatly appreciate that if you'd like to do that. So as always, we're going to be monitoring both the YouTube and Zoom chat streams for your questions with tonight's guest. And so please take advantage of that as we go through the discussion. DJ will be happy to answer questions if you want to interrupt him as he's going along. So just send a note and we'll do that from there. DJ Knott and Jodi Knott founded Gospel Aviation in 2015, and they moved to Bolivia with a vision of bringing aid to remote communities in the Andes. DJ flies an Experimental Super Cub, supporting their team of national doctors, dentists, and Bible teachers in the indigenous communities of the Western Highlands. Welcome to the program, DJ.
Hey, Steve. Good evening. Thanks for having me. It's a privilege to be on here. I've been kind of lurking on this site since I was a teenager, and definitely learned a lot from it and benefited a lot from the knowledge of the member base here, and hoping to just entertain a little bit, share something different. And also, I know a lot of these guys are involved in getting young people into aviation, and I just wanted to share a little bit about how I got involved with aviation not too long ago, and what things really were key for me and how people helped me out. Maybe give some other people ideas on how to mentor new kids. So anyway, for me, aviation started, it was I actually was watching the local mechanic work on a car, and I said to my dad, hey, I really like cars, I think I want to be a mechanic. I was probably about 9 or 10 years old, and he said, you should be an airplane mechanic. And so anyway, it turns out he had done a year abroad in college and lived with a mission pilot in Borneo, Indonesia. And he really got me hooked, showed me his old slides of the 185 going into jungle strips, and I was hooked. And I don't really remember how I got hooked on Cubs, but I guess the internet was just coming around, and I guess there were Super Cubs on there. I was interested in bush planes, anything bush plane. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, Steve. And anyway, I have a pretty cool job. Paul Klaus says he has the best job in the world, but anyway, I like mine, and I get to play with this airplane in a pretty cool environment. Let's see if we can advance the slide here. Okay, so anyway, after my dad got the bug going, I went to the library and checked out every book on aviation I could find, and this was one of them. And this was really the most influential book, mostly just pictures, but I would check this thing out like as much as I could. I was bumping up against the limits, of how much you could check it out in a year. And I just look at the pictures, and it was all 185 Super Cubs and stuff like that, and it really had an impact on me. I got so hooked on Super Cubs that in 8th grade, I guess I would talk about them to anybody who would listen. And my classmates got tired of it, and they got a ride at the local airport, and they got interested in airplanes. A couple of twins, and they'd say, well, the Cessna 337 is the best plane in the world, safest, and I was like, man, Super Cub's my favorite airplane. And so we go back and forth. And funny story, one day they enlisted some help with some of the other classmates, and they got creative, and one day they actually brought a rock to class, and they had taped little yellow wings on it. And they said, if your engine quits in a Super Cub, this is what's going to happen. And they'd throw it on the floor, and they'd do their own karaoke version of that Chevy commercial from the 90s, like a rock. And anyway, it was that's how bitten I was. To my parents' credit, they took me to the local hang glider place that everybody knew about because I was so desperate to fly. And thankfully, before I really got involved there at all, I heard about a local soaring club from a UPS pilot, and so got involved there, and that was probably the best club in the world. I don't know, never bumped into another one like it, but they really catered to junior members. They kept their costs down, and I milked cows at the local dairy and was able to pay for most of it. The guys there, helped me along too. And the guy that taught me to fly had a Cessna 180, a 53 180. And so that quickly became a favorite airplane too. And he's actually on the site, Airmaster 165, and great guy. We're still great friends. And he got me my first like 35 hours of power time in that 180. It was can't say I mastered it ever. It was like drinking from a fire hose. I had a glider license, and a 180 was kind of the other end of the spectrum. But anyway, they helped me all the way through apprenticing at the local shop, and then I went to college for A&P, and ended up doing some flight, the rest of my flight ratings, power instructor, and all that stuff. So that's kind of to make a long story short, I ended up 2008, right after graduation, I ended up in northern Bolivia in the jungle, with 1,000 hours and an airplane to fly and no clue what I was doing. Thankfully, a former mission pilot had taken me under his wing before I went down there, and I was going to dig ditches and cut firewood. And I knew I was just kind of pausing my career because I was going to go to Alaska and look up the Ellis brothers and whatever it took to get my foot in the door. And anyway, he had taken me aside and said, "You're going to end up flying. I've heard that there's a mission plane they're taking down, and I know they don't have a pilot lined up yet. So you're going to end up flying that plane." So he actually gave me some dual in this plane before it went south, 2 or 3 hours, and that was it. So anyway, I still have no idea how I stayed out of trouble. It was going into these strips that weren't well maintained. This was after we had been going in for a little while, kind of opening a new medical aid on the rivers in northern Bolivia, kind of Amazon jungle-like terrain. And this was after they improved the runway quite a bit, but we were going into basically unmaintained airstrips. Snake bite, This guy was showing me his jaguar skin, pretty cool. Some groups that didn't speak Spanish, just indigenous groups back there. And you want to get a 22-year-old hooked, you give them an airplane and send them out to do something cool. And I was pretty hooked. I lived in this hangar with a Spanish family there, or a Bolivian family that only spoke Spanish, and we communicated with hand signals. I remember my first medevac, they had to, the word for pregnant is embarazada. And well, of course, that I was like, why are we going to pick up an embarrassed lady? Like, I couldn't figure it out. Well, they had to kind of motion and show me what was going on. Anyway, I put a couple hundred hours on this airplane, and took medical groups in. It was just a blast. And just everything different, a kid from New England going to the jungle. I kind of had a deeper conversion experience in school, in college, and I decided, instead of like being 100% decided what I was going to do, bush pilot in Alaska, I had known that since 10 years old. I decided maybe I should ask God what he wanted me to do. But I said, no jungle, no desert. And the next summer, I ended up down in Phoenix, Arizona, instructing in gliders in the summer in the desert there. And then this was my first jungle assignment. So it's not very safe to say those kind of things if you're a Christian. Anyway, did some medevacs. This guy walked like 8 hours to get to an airstrip where we could bring his baby out. And these were a couple of my friends that got in a motorcycle accident. There, a couple missionary girls that got hit by a drunk driver, and medevac them. That was like a close to 1,000-mile round trip to go get them. I was at the big city and they were way off in the bush. And anyway, we had a bone stock 182 with the tiny little tires, and then we had a Mooney M20J for the longer hauls, because it was like 450 nautical miles from the main city of 1 million plus in the lowlands of Bolivia up to the jungle where we were working. So the Mooney was great for running back and forth. The local 206 pilots couldn't believe how little fuel it used. It was great. And everything was on a shoestring. They were just starting up. So it was, had some fun experiences. I remember one experience in the Mooney. I was trying to get home, and I had put the last money in my pocket in as fuel to get home. I didn't have any more cash on me, and the weather was bad. I was halfway home. I landed, and halfway home, and the weather guy said, "You're not going to make it." And I was like, "Oh no." And so I was like, "Well, I have no choice. I'm not staying here," because that particular place was like open gutters with sewage running down them. And I didn't know anybody there, and I didn't have any money. And I had a couple students in the back of the plane. I was like, for the mission school, I was like, there's no way we're staying here. So I kept going and had to deviate, landed at a place where I only knew one guy. And he ended up walking into the terminal in the pouring rain and like, "Why are you here?" And I was like, "How'd you know we were here?" Anyway, cool stuff like that happened. And that was one of the best weekends of my life with him. He had a house with just 3 walls of sticks. And I had no idea he was that poor, but he took us in and, made us feel like kings. So, I mean, as much as you can feel that way sleeping on a pile of boards, but just.
Hey, DJ, somebody wants to know where you were based, what the name of that place 450 miles away you were based in.
Okay, so I didn't really have a base. I was kind of nomadic, and I just went wherever the next flight would go. And I was mostly in Guayana, northern Bolivia, sometime in Rurrenabaque, and then Santa Cruz, Bolivia was kind of like the bigger city where we'd go with the big for surgery stuff.
And then my question is, how is the M20J as a short field, rough field airplane?
It does better than you'd think, but we really beat it up. We would take it into strips where they were taking metros in, and it was like grass and clay, and on takeoff it would start catching air before it was ready to fly, and it just bounced. And every time it hit a clump of grass, it would catch air and then hit the ground again. It was just terrible for the landing gear. They told me later when they rebuilt the landing gear, they're like, "What did you do to this airplane?" So we used it. Basically, we only went to towered airports with that one, which could be just be gravel or grass in Bolivia. They have towers at some of the little ones, but never out into the jungle proper with that. So anyway, went back to the States and got married, got my IA, worked for a year and a half, and then ended up in Guyana. Guyana, I thought I'd just put in a little plug for Guyana. Guyana is just an amazing country. They call it the land of many waterfalls. This is Equator Falls. It's Guyana is between Venezuela and Suriname, I believe. This is Equator. It's the largest single drop waterfall in the world, some 800 feet and significant volume, as you can see. Pretty cool. And I got a chance to walk across the interior of Guyana with a school group, and just the scenery was just unbelievable, and highly recommend visiting Guyana. I don't know, being there kind of off the tourist beaten track was pretty cool. They have these beautiful rivers in there. They're called blackwater rivers, and they're stained with tannic acid, crystal clear other than that, and just gorgeous area. So we went there to save this little guy. The pilot did a test takeoff, decided, oh yeah, I can take the rest of the load, turned around, came back in downwind on wet grass, and ended up in the river. So we got there a little bit later to try to patch it back up, and thankfully it wasn't too bad, and we got it patched up and flew out. Actually, I just want to mention this guy under the wing. It was one of my mentors, and he flies a Porter in Indonesia. His dad did for years before him, and actually died in a Kodiak a few years ago. They believe it was a flap malfunction on takeoff, and he didn't clear the obstacle. So anyway, he actually gave me a full checkout in Guyana, like 40 hours. So I learned a fair amount from him in the 182, and that was very helpful. I married the right girl. What can I say? She followed me all around doing this kind of stuff, worked on airplanes. She's a teacher, but we were out there working on airplanes in the bush. And we ended up in Guyana supporting a project there. The pilot wasn't a mechanic. He needed a mechanic. And what a great guy. He was project director and pilot, and just a fantastic project. We learned so much from him. And that airplane is a workhorse. It's a C model, stock except the tires and wing X and a sportsman cuff. And yeah, so it was way better performer than the stock 66 that I flew in Bolivia. And medevacs, they got a lot of snake bites there and stuff. He had medevacs routinely there. So jumping ahead, 2014, the same guy that had given me a couple hours of dueling that 182 before I went to Bolivia as a 22-year-old, a few years later, he said, look, you need some better training. And he sponsored me to go to the MAF pre-field standardization in Nampa, Idaho. And it's kind of a by invitation thing. So I applied and they accepted me. And that, it was life-changing as far as flying technique and discipline. Their safety record is really good and getting better all the time. And they have a lot of great ways of keeping themselves safe out there. And you get basically 30 hours with, I don't know, 5,000-6,000 hour mission pilot in a Turbo 206 and bopping around the strips around Nampa. So they kind of work you up. This is like I want to say it's a 5 or 8% slope. And then they worked us up to a 13%. And then this is Deadwood Reservoir, maybe in Idaho. Maybe some people know that. So we'd go into a strip, they'd have us evaluate it from the air and get all our numbers, write down how long it is, what's the slope, all this from the air, figure that out. And then we'd land and measure it and they, see if we were close. Of course, they have the charts already figured out, but just the discipline of doing that was really important for me. And then it kind of culminates in a a trip to the backcountry where they go into a bunch of the strips back there. And somebody's going to tell me which strip this is. I couldn't remember. Some bar. Wilson bar, maybe? Anyway, in a 206, this had me right at, maxed out, trying to fly down this canyon and put it into there safely. And they want you stopped in 60% or less. So really life-changing. They also teach aborts, like Lori was talking about. They teach that, and they're really big on that. And we'd go out to the dry lake bed, and they would set up cones 200 feet apart, and we'd do aborts from 200, 400, 600, 800. 800, you're airborne aborts, and full takeoff briefing on every takeoff. And really just the discipline that I never really learned before. So also, I wanted to, this is Allison Ranch. They have permission to go into some private ranches there, which is pretty cool. The approach to this is in a 206, definitely had me on my toes, and it's a cool little spot. This, I believe, is whitewater, and I wanted to mention this because another MAF pilot who's on this site with a Super Cub, I was talking to him, and he said, something I haven't heard is illusions, people talking about illusions, and whitewater has crazy illusions, and I thought I'd just mention it. This is on glide path short final to whitewater in a 206. We're coming down 500 feet a minute, I don't remember, 1800 RPM or something, and we're going to hit our spot there, but it does not look like it. And if you didn't know that, if I didn't have an instructor sitting there, I would have gone around because you look way too high. But illusions are a big deal. And they also teach, at some point, I guess right here, we wouldn't quite be committed. I think you could probably still turn out left, but they teach that committed call when you're, beyond your safe go around point. And anyway, in a 206, I feel like this is, it really takes it up a notch. The Cub is more forgiving, but still, the places you can take a Cub, you can get into the same kind of scenarios. So this is the top of the strip at Whitewater. It's not a particularly difficult strip. It's like 10% slope or something. I don't remember how long, but just the illusions are crazy there. So anyway, 2015, like Steve said, we had been bopping around doing volunteer work for a bunch of other organizations, well, a bunch of other projects under one bigger organization, and nobody was doing what we wanted to do, what we felt called to do in Western Bolivia, because during my time there in the jungle, I had always wanted to go to the mountains and see what that was like. And so anyway, we founded a 501c3 in 2015 and landed there February 2015 to get started. Just two naive kids. Anyway, bought this 74 Land Cruiser and started scouting, trying to find remote communities that needed help. And obviously we wanted to find an area where aviation would be the key to it, that couldn't be easily accessed otherwise. So I just wanted to show a little of the diversity of Western Bolivia. It's a pretty neat place. You've got the Andes, obviously. This is Lake Titicaca at 12,000 feet, roughly 12.5. Beautiful lake. And then as you go south, you've got huge salt lakes to the south and desert, and people living in stuff like this. No trees anywhere in sight. I guess the people here live like on llamas and potatoes, and that's about it. So flamingos, like Andean flamingos up there. This is a vicuña. It's a wild camelid there related to the llama. They're endangered. And we were looking for villages like this, and we ended up getting off of the high plains where those other pictures were from and more into the mountains, into the actual mountain range. And we started finding what we're looking for, remote communities like this one. This one, as of 5-6 years ago, it would have been about an 8-hour hike from the nearest road. And now there's a road that goes within 45 minutes of it. But remote stuff like this is what we were looking for. And we got connected with the right people, cutting a long story short, because it took months. But, and at first they were real suspicious of us, and the locals didn't trust us, but it took some time to gain their trust. And then we started taking doctors in there and on foot. And as we worked there, we started getting requests to go to bigger villages as well that had road access. So we've kind of done a mix of that since, but we really started out in the most remote places we could find. We added dentistry, which is huge. Everybody needs a dentist out there, and got a little portable unit. And our dentists are awesome. They work with whatever they've got. And you got the unskilled labor. So she's like, what would you need a toothbrush for? Anyway, in all fairness, yeah, I mean, she might have an excuse, but the younger girl there definitely should get one. and then recently we've started getting into more medevacs and also assisting the people with surgeries that they can't get done easily. So we kind of host them in the city, and we send a doctor with them as their advocate and help them get through the health system and get their health needs met. The world here really revolves around sheep and potatoes, and a little bit of everything else, some wheat and barley and beans, but potatoes are pretty much the thing. These are a couple of our medical people weathering a little storm. So in the mountains, we get a lot more weather than you do in the high plain there, and the weather can be fairly challenging, especially in rainy season. The people, there's a whole range of economic status or economics there, but the people we went there to reach in the first place were these shepherds, mostly shepherds and subsistence farmers, and some of them back in those roadless communities still live like they have for centuries and centuries. This is a typical kitchen, so gives you an idea. And we've got to visit some pretty fantastic places. This is one of the most beautiful places I've ever been, and the roads are fantastic too in a different kind of way. This is the highest I've ever driven a car, 16,000 feet, and that was the road getting there. And this happens too. So we've got the motivation to fly, and we'll get back to the airplanes here. So 2015, we really started thinking, we've got to move on this aviation part of it because we were getting started on the ground. And I called Dan Dufault, and I saw his picture on supercub.org, and he had this airplane in the picture, and I noticed it had a big stretcher door on it. So I called him, and he said, or private messaged him probably. Anyway, he didn't really want to sell it at that point, and we didn't have any money. So that worked out. But anyway, got to know him a little bit. And of course, that airplane, 2015, that airplane was at New Holstein, and I believe won at New Holstein and Oshkosh with Bobby Breeden flying it. So this is fall 2017, and here we are, owners of that airplane. And I just want a big shout out to Dan. He's an amazing guy, and I called him up, and he immediately knocked a bunch off his price for us, and I was blown away. I called him up to say, hey, we want your airplane, because I saw it come up for sale, and I recognized it. And so I called him right away, and he's like, oh, you can have it for less. And so he really treated us well, and it's an amazing airplane. So here, this is just funny. We put it on standard gear for a few days while we were getting the shocks kind of looked through by TK1, by Monster Shock. So, okay, so there's a lot between these two pictures, but I'm going to go back for a minute. Also, big shout out to my friend Bill, Airmaster 165 on the site. This is where I learned to fly at Springfield. And oh, I forgot to put in the picture. There's a picture of his wife there with us at the WAD. We showed up at the WAD that year, 2017, with this airplane. And just for a day, I was super busy and we were trying to get the airplane to go ready to go south. And I didn't have much time, but that was cool. And yeah, he hosted me while we got some tires on it and a pod. And then I hustled it off to Georgia, and kind of under the wing of Charlie Aileron down there. And big shout out to him too, because I told him I was just coming in to install some Ferry tanks, and I ended up being there a long time. We did an engine monitor and we did a bunch of stuff. He helped me put seatbelts to the floor because it didn't have it, and some safety things he helped me do. And then we were working on the Ferry tank mod. And the importer kept telling me 2 more weeks. And finally, December, I just pulled the plug. I said, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to have to park it for the winter and come back. So William Holland, who's heli chicken, I think, on the site, he took me in and stuck the plane in his hangar for the winter. So supercub.org community all the way. And also a couple of his hangar neighbors and stuff helped out. And I believe they now have Cubs as well. We had a little issue. So I came back in May. I became an importer so that we could just do it all ourselves. And I came back in May to do it. And then I did kind of an annual on the airplane and a condition inspection, and found where an engine mount had been chafing. And so off came the engine like 3 days before the scheduled flight. Because it was an experimental, I had to get special permissions. Well, had to. Nobody ever asked for them, but so I had this schedule, and then 3 days before I was supposed to leave, this happened. So Charlie grabbed the engine mount and patched it up, and had it to me the next day, and so he really saved the day on that. And we finally got out, and this is heading south for real. Super heavy and ready to cross a bunch of water. This was southern Florida there. This landed at Pilot Country Airport near Tampa Bay, and to pick up a raft. And within 10 minutes, I had like 3 offers to stay the night. Great people there. And the guy who took me in, his name is Andrew Stolte, I believe. And he had a Helio in his hangar and stuff, just the right kind of people. Anyway, fantastic. Him and his wife, Erica, treated me like royalty. It was fantastic, and sent me on my way, refreshed. This is leaving the Miami coast. And about here, I'm wondering, what am I doing? So first stop was Stella Maris. Don't recommend going there. It's but I kind of goofed it up too. There was no tower, and I got there at 5:30 with no clue that there was no tower. And so there was nobody there. There were just mosquitoes. And thankfully there were some Cirrus pilots, Brazilians, that were ferrying a Cirrus to Brazil. And I met them in Fort Lauderdale, and they stuck around for me and waited, with the hotel taxi or whatever. There's like 2 resorts on the island. I went to the worst one. It was a mess. And the taxi driver said, "Oh, don't worry about customs. Like, they've all gone home for the night. Just come back early in the morning and you'll, deal with them then." So I took their advice, and that was a very bad idea. And, in the morning I had, wrath to deal with, and they were going to, confiscate the airplane, and on and on and on. So it wasn't a pleasant experience. But anyway, we got through. Next stop was Dominican. That was like night and day difference. Wonderful people, and half the cost for 3 times the accommodation. It was a big difference. So there's that was the second day out. And then third day was over to Anguilla, however they say that. They're not even sure. And that was crazy. I skipped Puerto Rico because I didn't want to have to go through US customs again. They say they're the worst going in. So uh anyway, I had 20 knot headwinds going east there. So I was making 60 knots across Puerto Rico. So thankfully it was a short leg. And then there were like 20 knot winds at the airport when I got there. And so I was a little nervous. Tied the airplane down real good. And then from there was to Grenada. And that was kind of a long haul. Had some friends there. So they picked me up and that was real nice. But, you know, I think it's a pretty nice place in general. There was somebody else there. I don't know who. Real nice folks there. Grenada, everybody seemed friendly. And then I passed Trinidad and Tobago. Don't make the mistakes I made. I went there in the Mooney back in the day, back, you know, years earlier, and almost like thought I would never leave. I thought it was like a black hole. They're like, you have to file a flight plan. I'm like, where? And they're like, in the tower. Well, how do I get there? Well, you can't. And I didn't have enough money to pay an agent. They wanted like hundreds and hundreds of dollars for an agent, and I was just picking up my boss. And anyway, didn't have a cell phone. It was crazy. But skipped that. Went to Guyana. Guyana, you have to watch out because you cannot arrive after sundown. So they do not let single engines fly in the airspace after sundown. But I had friends there, and that made it really easy. There's a guy there named, well, they call him Beardman, and he's the guy to look for if you pass through Guyana Ogle Airport, the smaller one. I think I gave him $100, but he didn't want any money. He was like, "Oh no, you're a friend. I'm going to do it for you." And he handled everything, you know, walked me through all the locked doors. It was amazing. Anyway, look for him. And then Guyana, you can't leave before sunrise. So I left at the crack of dawn, and I had my longest leg to Manaus over all the Amazon. And that was pretty freaky because for a number of reasons, as I was getting close to the border, you lose contact with Guyanese controllers. And so you're trying to relay through the caravans that are flying around. And then finally I lost them, and I picked up the Brazilian side. And when I finally got contact with them, they couldn't speak English. And so we went around for 20 minutes or something. And finally they came on with somebody who could, and they said, "Don't contact us unless you have an emergency." And so I've got 400 miles of jungle and thunderstorms ahead of me and restricted areas and everything. And I'm like, what? You don't want to know where I am? And I didn't plan on flying IFR, but I quickly realized that wasn't going to work. And I got pretty much trapped, you know, and forced into it, and flying on the G5 and stuff. So it was not a good experience. I wouldn't try VFR again through there. I'd plan on having to go IFR. So, and prep for it. Anyway, I finally popped out near Manaus, and it was perfect weather, and glad to have that behind me. And then Manaus, wonderful people in the city, but at the airport's really strange, and like you can't buy avgas there, so you have to go to the flight club. Flight club's 2 miles away, and you have to pay like a $500 landing fee each time. So you have to pay it once, go to the flight club, come back, pay it again, and then you can leave. And when I filed, and you have to file a flight plan and everything to go to the flight club. And when I filed and taxied out, they were like, "Where are you going?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to whatever the identifier was, you know, the flight club." And they said, "Well, where's that?" And I was like, "Can't you see it from your tower?" I'm thinking like, there's no signs at the airport. They're like, "Do you want taxiway Alpha or Bravo?" And I'm like, I have no clue because it's not on the jet chart. There's no signage, nothing. I was so confused by that place. But once I got out of the airport, the people were great. So it was just, and there was a thunderstorm sitting over the airport. It was a mess, but probably my most stressful day of flying ever. But the next leg was to Bolivia, so that went better. And back on home turf here, getting like the full, they told me, they said, "We're going to have to bring out the full cavalry." And they did. There were like 20 of those guys. And you know, they all ask you the same questions like in a row. So you get like 10 different guys asking you, where'd you come from? How much fuel do you have? Where are you going? Do you have any waypoints in your GPS? Let's see this, let's see that, you know, and like inspecting for drugs and whatever. It was crazy. But that's the control tower in the background. And the next morning, I felt like I was already home. It was amazing because I know Bolivia a little bit, and it was an easy shot down to Cochabamba. Um, except I forgot my coat because you won't go from jungle to, and you got to clear this pass at like 14,000. I froze, didn't have the heater installed because we had a cracked muffler right before I left, and so we got a new muffler, but the shroud didn't fit. Anyway, Clint is amazing, and he got me the muffler in time, but no shroud, so froze going to Cochabamba. I could hardly talk when I got there. I was like hypoxic and hypothermic and everything at 13,000 feet. And there's all this traffic, and I'm like, oh no, I can't remember my Spanish. They talk on the radio in Spanish, and it was crazy. But glad to finally get there, take a deep breath. So that was the ferry flight. In case anybody wants to duplicate it, it wasn't much fun, I have to say.
So what was the mileage on that? What's the total mileage?
Oh boy, I don't know. I'm not even going to guess because I'll get it wrong. But I tried to fly like 5 to 7 hours a day, and it took me 10 days. Okay, wow. I took a day off, so it was 50 hours though from Charlie's place. Oh, actually, I left from. Oh, I'm not going to remember his name now, and that's a shame. But there's a guy, one of Charlie's best buddies up here. He let me use his strip to leave because the local airport was closed and it was a mess. So he let me use his grouse strip to actually leave from. So from his place, it was 10 days.
So how much fuel? Somebody wants to know how much fuel did you have, and what was the range? What was your range?
Okay, so yeah, we went around and around on that. It has stock tanks, and no headers, so about 35 max in the mains, and then I had a 29-gallon tank from West Marine and 18-gallon bladder that I could get about 16 or 17. I think it was like 72 usable is what I figured. And wow. So not very good range at 80 knots. And I was burning 8.5. That didn't work out. Since then, I've learned how to run at Lena Peak, and I have better baffling. But at that point, also, my slick mags, which were like freshly overhauled, drifted 7 degrees advance during the ferry flight. So my oil temps were crazy high the whole time. Like I was getting up in the 240s at times, trying to climb with the heavy load. And yeah, so anyway, knocking the time back down to its proper level and better baffling, bigger oil cooler. Now I can run Lena Peak at 80 knots and like 6 gallons an hour. But yeah, the range was kind of sketchy, and we didn't want to ship the 35-inch tires because they would have charged me a ton of import duty on them, thousands of dollars, and the shipping and everything. So we just ran with them on.
So what was the longest? What was the longest stretch? Was it like over the Amazon? Was that the longest stretch where there was just nowhere to go?
Yeah, I think it was about 700 nautical miles.
Wow.
Thankfully, I had a little tailwind over Brazil, which they tell me is typical. So that's good. So anyway, then it was, got there in May. It was January before we cleared customs and paid the import duty and got a number on the plane, got a registration locally. And that was the fastest anybody had ever seen it done. My friend Tony was sitting 13 months for his 206. So this is January 2018. This is my first load of like donated clothes and stuff. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how does a newbie get into off airport flying. And so I was smart enough to take it pretty slow at the beginning. And I went down to the jungle. Oh, I went back for a refresher at MAF because it had been 3 years. That was helpful. This is the dry lake where they play around. So anyway, I went down and I started hauling loads for the other mission group down to their airstrips, which are like 2,000 feet, 1,300 feet and up, grass and maintained. So that was a good start. and a lot of fun. And then I bit off more than I should have, and I didn't have a problem here, but this is at 13.8, and it used to be a 206 strip, only about half usable now. I don't know how many meters. It's probably like 1,800 feet, 1,800 feet usable. And obviously, the hill there is an issue if you do a long approach. So this was my first off airport in Bolivia. I shouldn't have gone there, but anyway, I did, and I got out unscathed. And then I started practicing at some of the easier lower airstrips around the Cochabamba area. This one's at 10. This is a place called Toro Toro. It's a big tourist area. There's dinosaur tracks and caves and all sorts of cool stuff there. If you ever go to Bolivia, look up Toro Toro. And then they told me about this airstrip. It's only about 25 minutes from Cochabamba, and it's 3,000 feet long, like 100 feet wide at 10,000 feet. And this became my practice strip. And the same guy that sponsored me through MAF, he said, you really should have 50 hours in country before you do anything. So I went and practiced here a lot. Well, seemed like a lot, because to get out of the airport is like a 2-hour process. You got to pass a drug check and all this other stuff and file a flight plan. And so it's a big hassle to get out and practice. I went to another strip just across the valley and bumped into this girl and her father. And that was really cool that the father came up and he's like, hey, I guess he's like the local witch doctor is what the other guys told me. But and they said, oh, he has money, but he's so stingy. I don't know. They always talk bad about each other. But he's like, well, do you have like something for my little girl? And my oldest is exactly the same age. And of course, so we had dolls and everything. And so I flew out there again and left him a doll and some other stuff for her. So that was a lot of fun while we were practicing. And there was another airstrip with a little bit of slope. So I practiced on some slope stuff. And this was our third seat set up, and worked out really well. I dropped 5 pounds from the stock seat and added another seat for 5 pounds less. So it's not very comfortable, but it's better than walking. So there are a couple of my docs in the back. So then I started to do like real off airport where there was no airstrip, just the villages that we had already been working in. And this picture is not from them. I didn't take any gear the first time into this place. I went empty. And I just wanted to mention this strip is kind of a hilltop, and there's all these different contours and stuff. And it really wasn't a good place to start. And I scared myself really bad because one landing, I landed long. I walked around on these mountains for a while, but I misjudged what type of grass it was. And so I misjudged my height and everything. And I ended up long and landed and came to basically a stop, but it was swinging downhill and I didn't feel like I could stop it. I was scared. And so I did a go around from almost a standstill, but pointed totally the wrong direction, like 90 degrees off the strip. And thankfully it dropped off like 40-50% off the side and just like ski jumped off. And then there was another hill on the other side of the ditch and I missed it, but I didn't know if I was going to. So at this point I should have had some training, and I was really in over my head. And so I kind of knew it, but you just want to do it anyway. And so bad trap to fall into. This strip is my easiest strip. It's 900 feet long, 10% slope and straight and even slope. And so I practiced some at that, and that was helpful. There's a village here that we've served with the doctors. But I had a scary experience my first time here because I had watched the Ellis brothers and all these things since I was a kid. And they said they were talking about like super steep slopes. And they were like, when you turn downhill, don't touch your brakes, stuff like this. Well, this is only 10%, but I didn't know what's the limit. The tail's light, I'm empty leaving there. And I turned downhill and it was the steepest I had been on yet. And I was afraid to touch the brakes. And so I swung through the runway heading and I ended up, you can see some posts behind the plane and barbed wire. Those weren't there at the time. and I ended up going off that direction. And same kind of story, I was heading off the side of the hill and there was another ridge, and I was like, am I going to make it? You know, is it going to fly before I end up into that next ridge? And all because I was afraid to use the brakes for directional control on the start of the roll and actually keep it pointed straight for the first 50 feet. So learned a lesson there. And that at that point I was like, you know what? I really should have gone and like tried to simulate this before I'm out here, you know, like how steep a slope are you really going to have a problem on with your brakes? So this was another pretty easy strip that I started learning on. But once again, first time in, super scary for a novice. And thankful I have the big tires, because there, you know, there's always stuff you didn't see, and there's like these 12-inch steps in the ground where they've cultivated and then years ago, and then it's grown over, and you hit those, it feels like stuff's gonna break. And this whole section, this all happened within the space of a couple months, and I was really in over my head, and it's amazing I survived without messing something up real bad. But I landed this one, messed up on my airstrip evaluation, and I thought the approach touchdown zone was too steep, so I wanted to land kind of on the top, just the end of where you can see there. But it was too short for that, and I didn't really nail down the length good enough, and I touched down too fast. Strip was too short, and I got about to where the airplane's parked, and I said, oh shoot, I had decided it was a no-go around strip, and I freaked out and went around, and you know, just kind of banked off the right side of the ridge, and the airplane flew, and I, you know, was thinking enough to think, you know, keep the nose down into the bottom of the gully. And once again, it came around the corner. I just didn't know the airplane well enough, and I broke my rule of not going around on the strip. So just kind of the whole accident chain setting itself up there. You can see the contour of this one's really weird, and this was that same airstrip, and it's got curves in it and humps, and anyway, it was a mess. It was way over my abilities at that point. And then we started using the airplane to do medical trips into my easiest ones that I had been into, and that went pretty well, because once I'd been in there, it wasn't a big deal. This one, I had been here on the ground, and I thought I can land here. So this is a super tight box canyon for my abilities anyway. And my rule is I need to be able to turn in half the available space, or I shouldn't even be there. So anyway, I was able to figure it out and got in there, and that was pretty cool. It was the coolest place I've been yet. This is the drug check that you got to pass every time you leave the international airport. So I leave the hangar, load up, leave the hangar. Well, not even. File a flight plan, get it stamped, signed, sealed. You know, I forget a dozen different seals and signatures. Then you can buy gas. Then you taxi, I don't know, half a mile to the main ramp, get the police to come out and unload, get it all checked and sniffed by the dog, reload, and then you can leave. So we are working on getting our own airstrip, which would be amazing. This was
that's what all the real drug dealers do, right? They have their own airstrips. So they don't have to go through that.
Yep. Yeah. So this was a medevac we did into a gravel bar. Yeah, they called me for the medevac, and I hadn't been in there, but they cleared all the big rocks off, and we were able to get in there. The tires probably would have gone over what was there, but I was just a chicken. And actually, just for the newbies out there, like, I actually, when I was dragging it, I touched the tire to feel it, and it felt awful. There was this huge bang, and I went around and looked it over a bunch more, and it ended up landing it. But when I got home, one of my flying wires in the back was bent, and all of them were loose because a big rock, apparently when I touched the tire, there was a big rock right there, and it kicked up because I was still, you know, I was dragging it at, I don't know, 60 miles an hour or so, and it must have hit the tail wire. So anyway, stuff can happen even when you think you're doing it all right. So we took a medical trip in here as well, which is really neat. And Got to camp out in the airplane and stuff. This is, oh, now I know why that slide is there. This medical trip we did, I was ferrying the doctors from this strip at 13.4 down to that gravel bar at 5,000 feet and shuttling them down there, which was really neat and worked out really well. 2 at a time with their stuff. And at 13.4 with 2 people and fuel and their stuff, it doesn't climb very well, but it did okay. And you get a few hundred feet a minute, maybe 3. It's like flying a weak J3 loaded. All right, so then I told Steve I'd share a fender bender. This, I kind of want to tell the whole story. I know I'm running out of time, Steve.
There's no time limit.
Okay, so this one, it was like your real accident chain deal. I was breaking a bunch of my rules. I never land a spot now. This is a new rule since then, but I don't land a spot the first time when I'm going in with the doctors, because I want to go there first, check it out empty, and figure it all out before I have the pressure of other people's schedules and stuff. And I was breaking that rule. That rule wasn't hard and fast yet, but I was working on that. And I went in there with some load, had never even picked out an airstrip there. And I spent over an hour trying to find a place that I felt was safe. I ended up picking this place, which was 110 meters, so like 350 feet, pretty steep. And I went in, landed it, and it went okay. And then I went out. I was doing a double run, so I went out to get the doctors. And I've got some videos. Let's see if I can switch screens. So, all right, cool. Oh, you know what? I didn't share the audio, but it's just airplane noise. Should be fine. Oh, I can't hear you, Steve. Anyway.
Did you share just the PowerPoint and not your screen? Because what we got is the PowerPoint.
Oh.
So do an unshare and a reshare.
Okay.
Of your screen.
Let's do that.
Then you can fix everything.
Unshare, reshare.
And then click the audio button.
Desktop. Desktop. Okay, let's see if this works. Do you have it now?
Yep.
Okay, so then I went into another new airstrip, which was an old DC-3 airstrip that I'd never seen before, never landed. And I went to pick up the doctors there, which is another mistake. Oh, sorry, guys. Let me back it up. All right, so this is up in the high plains part. All right, so I was just dragging the strip there to get a look at it. And then a whole bunch of things happened right here because I pulled up to go around. I had a tailwind. I was dragging it downwind. And I pulled up and had very little performance. This is at 13,000. I'm at 13.5 or something. And I realized the highway is right there. And I look over and there's a police checkpoint on the highway right abeam the airstrip. And I thought, drat, I don't want them to see me and come over and do the 50 questions and all that. So I saw the doctors here right under me. They were walking across the desert here to get to the airstrip. And so I'm watching them, and then I decided to try to turn short of the highway because I was worried about the police harassing us. And anyway, you can hear I was down on power, and then like I started getting tighter. All right, so I scared myself because I realized that I hadn't given myself enough margin here. So now like my adrenaline's going a little bit, and the police did come out and they did harass us anyway. And it was, they delayed us a bunch. And, I was trying to get back into my destination quickly before the thermals made it too hard to land that steep airstrip. So anyway, got the docs and got out of there. But it was a little reminder, like horsing around with the airplane at that altitude and doing tight turns close to the ground with a tailwind, like, and I was distracted by a couple things and I was pulling too hard, and like I could have had a problem there. I'm gonna jump over. Let's see. Can I just, Steve, you can tell me if you can see this next video?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So this was my airstrip. This was the takeoff earlier in the morning. We're kind of going backwards.
Nice.
Okay, so that's only 110 meters or so, and I felt like I didn't have much margin there because that was empty going out. So I was like, I don't know. I got back with the doctors and I had big updrafts on final like I thought I would, and then the downdraft right at the last minute, and that was all I could do to hold glide path and hit my spot. And I found out when you're task saturated like that, directional control can go out the window. And I was like pretty much full brake to try to keep it straight after touchdown. And so it had been a pretty stressful day. And then this, I parked the plane and a big tailwind started ripping down the strip. And I thought, well, I don't want to leave with that. So I went and they fed us lunch and I helped the doctor set up. And these are all just factors, right? And I don't fly in the afternoons here, like just don't do it. But I decided to break that rule. And the locals told me, oh, this wind will just get worse. And I had a schedule to keep and I had to go get another doctor for the next day. So I was like, I'm going to try to get out of here. But then I got chicken and I was like, well, I don't want to try that same takeoff with like a 15 knot tailwind. So anyway, you can just say dumb at this point. Like we're getting to the really dumb stuff. So then I add dumb on top of dumb, and I decide to go up beyond my parking spot, which is flat, up a 40% grade to the top of the strip, which is about 10%. And I was like, I'll just roll through that steep section, roll through my parking spot, and then lift off. I'll have, I'll definitely get off this mountain, no question. Basically falling off it. But anyway, I knew I couldn't get up that steep part at full power, so I had to get a run on it. And then I was distracted, and I should have been more to the right where it was smoother, like a more gradual transition. And I lined up right for the worst spot here, and you can see what happened. So that's how you break a set of TK1s, just like that. I had another shot, but I wasn't able to get it on the program here from outside where somebody got me with their cell phone. So I came off the 10%, and when I got to the 40%, it just kind of launched off the edge, but it wasn't flying. And full power, and the stick was coming back more and more as I saw that thing coming up, and it wasn't gonna clear it. So I smacked into that level spot, I don't know, 800 feet a minute or something, maybe more. So I'll replay that for you. My plan was to roll down the steep spot and like hold the nose down. And then I don't know if that would have been any better, actually. It might have been worse. But that was my plan until I got to the edge, and it was so steep, I freaked out and just kind of went to neutral elevator. And so it just parachuted off the edge and hit with a big bang. And actually, I didn't really have a tailwind on that takeoff because I was kind of protected by the mountain, but I was afraid I'd hit the prop. So I was like on my iPad watching the video as I'm flying home, worried the prop's going to come apart on me. And I didn't think anything of the gear. I heard it hit the limits. I heard a bang when it hit the limits, but I thought, well, it's tough. I'm sure that was fine. It didn't feel like that much of an impact. And I got back and landed, and I had a perfect crosswind landing on one wheel thinking, whoa, I'm pretty good, you know? And then I taxi up to the hangar and the plane's like sitting crooked. And oh man, I had landed on the good wheel, and I praise the Lord for that because the other wheel was not in any condition to hold stuff up. So I can show you what happened to the TK1s. Let's see. Go back to this. Do you have the PowerPoint?
We do.
Okay. All right. So that I will give TK1s a lot of credit because that's the failure mode. Apparently, they just rip instead of coming apart, which was really cool. And the safety cables hit the limits, and these things stretched, bent all the bolts, and broke the shocks. I haven't even taken the shocks apart to see what's inside, but it's a mess, I'm sure. So anyway, Super Cub community again, because I called up Bill Russ. I had seen he had just put Acmes on his plane, and I was like, hey, Bill, you want to sell those bungees? And he shipped them to me like, you know, overnight or something, and he wouldn't take any money. He was an amazing friend in that situation. He barely knows me, but so we were down for I don't know, a month or two. We got those down in a suitcase, put them on. And anyway, this is a cool picture with a 600.
Is that set up for beach landings there? Is that what that is?
Yeah, off camber, steep off camber. Anyway, all right, so we got back flying with the bungees, and I had to relearn how to land because TK1s are amazing, and bungees, you do bounce. So this was another dumb thing I did. Just a couple months after the TK1 incident, I once again was breaking my rules, and I dropped off the doctors, and then I went to check out this strip empty, but I still had the stress of being in charge of this trip, and I had a fuel limit. And so I went in there and I did, I don't know, 20 passes over, and I could not decide. Well, I checked out like 5 different places. None of them were very good. This one was the best. Did like 20 passes. Couldn't give myself the 100%. You know, Greg Miller, Greg Miller's videos are great about that. He talks about that. But I couldn't give myself the 99%. And I was like, and I hit my fuel like, okay, you got to either land it or go back to where your docks are so you have fuel to get home. And I told myself, what could go wrong? So there was a cultivated part just below this with a big step, like 12, 14 inches. And I was so worried about that, well, I landed the wrong contour. If I had been more left, I would have been on a better contour. But anyway, this was really steep, as you can see, too steep. And I hit that big step and it rolled through it fine. But I was so focused on that I went to idle. As soon as I was solidly on the ground, I went to idle. And then I'm stuck. This is at 12.5 probably, and full power, the plane totally empty with 20 gallons. I could not go up that hill, period. So I ended up having to like back it down to this spot, which was a little flatter. And that was a big hassle too, because that the early tail shock, what is it, a T3 on the back? It was like the prototype T3 from Dan. When you go backwards, it tucks way under the plane and it kind of locks the wheel. It won't swivel anymore. And so it was very difficult. Anyway, it was another one of those dumb moments. So I ended up getting out and walking around cooling down because I was like, this is not good. Will I ever get the plane out of here? Trying not to think bad thoughts, but I cooled down for a while, which was the right thing to do. And I was really tempted to just take off downhill from here, but I knew I didn't have enough space. I had about 80 meters and it was rough, and then bushes like 6 feet high. And I was like, I'm going to be in the bushes and it's not going to be pretty. So I resisted the urge to just panic and get out of there. And I ended up taxiing across the hill carefully and able to gain a little momentum and then turn upslope and make it up. But it was once again, I don't know if the plane was anywhere close to tipping over, but I didn't have the proper training to know what the limit was, and it felt really scary. So there's another shot of it. I'm down below that lip. You can see there's a big lip here, just in the bottom right corner of the picture. So anyway, I think that was like over 30% there when I measured it. No, 26. I think I came up with 26%. Anyway, finally got the plane to the top of the hill. I shut down, tied down, and sat there for half an hour just cooling off because I was like, don't do anything dumb now, like the plane's okay. So this was a little encounter I had with ice because I decided to try to pop through an overcast to get home instead of scud running through the pass. And I went up to 20 and picked up ice on the way through. Not very smart once again, and like nobody to tell you don't try that. So I did and got away with it. But not trying to tell you stories to like tell
DJ,
people.
there are actually people out there who would tell you not to do that.
That's good because yeah, I need a few more of those around. But yeah, I think having a good safety counselor is a good thing. Recently, the chief pilot from the university where I went, he's retired, and I call him up, and he has no sympathy, and he doesn't pull any punches on me, and he's like, you need to be careful, and your number one job is getting home to your family and stuff like that. So he's really good for me. And I think that's important to have people who will kind of give you a check. And my wife also, Jodi's great at saying, hey, like, are you following your rules? Like, are you breaking your rules? Are you following MAF guidelines? Which has kept me out of trouble a lot. I really credit that training to being alive through this process. So this was our first medevac.
Hey DJ, one quick question in there. Do you run oxygen when you're at 20,000 feet, or are you just so used to being so up in the air there?
Definitely run oxygen. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't have the picture with there's another picture that I took up there with the pulse ox on my finger and the oxygen flowing. Yeah, definitely. Pulse ox to monitor is like cheap and easy. If you don't have oxygen, I think you should have one of those. And but I live at 9, so I get a little leeway maybe. But when I'm going to an airstrip on the way out, when I'm going to a hard airstrip, I put it on the way out and I wear it the whole way out. I don't usually take it off unless I'm like below 10 or on the ground. And then on the way back, sometimes I don't because I'm going to a 10,000 foot runway. But yeah, oxygen is a big deal.
Really, a pilot should not have to ask that question, but I know other people that don't do it. So that's why I was just kind of. So where do you start using oxygen? What altitude do you feel like you got to use oxygen about?
I put it on at about 12 when I'm climbing out of Cochabamba, and I wear it because we go to 15 to go over the pass, and then to maintain radio contact, and I'm supposed to close my flight plan on the radio. So to maintain radio contact, I have to stay at 14. So I wear it all the way out.
So another thing probably good to point out here too, and somebody asked about this, is that you're not in Bolivia right now, and you're actually in Tennessee, right?
Correct.
And congratulations.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. So we came back to have a baby and our third one. So a boy this time. So I could have 3 pilots. I don't know yet, but my middle girl she loves airplanes. Like you take her to the airport and she just wants to touch him. She doesn't want to let go. She says airplane. She can pick an airplane sound out of street noises and she loves it. She's coming up on 2 years old. So she may be the pilot. We'll see. So I've got just a couple more pictures here, I think, Steve. So now we've been able to, I've got like 140 hours in the airplane in country there doing this kind of stuff, which isn't much, but I'm also getting better at keeping the rules and knowing a little more what not to try. And we're able to start doing some medical work with the airplane. And this one baby we've done, we did a medevac for him when he was 6 days old, and then we've had a couple other interventions. One of them, this was an emergency intervention right there in his home village, um, because of complications from the surgery. We had to get out there fast. And anyway, that's really rewarding to be able to do stuff like that. With COVID, we used the planes. They shut us down. They wouldn't let us do humanitarian flights. Politics, anyway. Unless you're benefiting the campaign, they don't really care. So they finally got permission, and this is the bigger humanitarian group where I hangar the plane. They also have this big medical branch, so they had all these donated medical supplies, and we were able to fly some of those out and take them to places that were getting hit hard with the COVID stuff. So they have a caravan. My friend Tony is also in the hangar with his Turbo 206, and then we have a Cub. So we have like the whole range, and really nice. And I was also able to haul some stuff into this village during the COVID time. Bags of rice and different things, because some of their transportation lines were cut off. So they can grow their potatoes and they have their sheep, but they weren't getting anything else. Oh, and big shout out to Acme. I'm going to forget somebody, but Acme Shocks. I called them up and I said, hey, I was really dumb and I broke a set of TK1s, and they're like, hey, we're just going to send you a set of Acme Shocks, like, obviously didn't deserve that. But anyway, they're great guys. And so, yeah, way easier than the bungees for sure. And very cool of them. So that's kind of the story. And I would just say to new guys, like, don't believe everything, watch Steve Pierce's, stuff happens. And I was really impressed with the Flying Cowboys bringing out the safety aspect and bringing out that these guys, they don't brag about themselves, but those guys have some serious experience, thousands of hours, and you wouldn't necessarily know it by watching YouTube. And it seems like they're always doing kind of crazy stuff, but yeah, it's easy to bend stuff. It's easy to kill yourself trying to do what they do. So good discipline, some training, stuff like that is going to be important.
Hey, DJ, a couple other questions. One person asked, do you use a cannula or a mask when you're up there at altitude?
I use a cannula. I don't go to 20. I've only been there once. So I use a cannula and I use it, 15 and below basically on a daily basis.
Yeah. And so tell us, a couple people actually asked this question. What's the name of your organization that you founded?
Gospel Aviation. And I should have had a slide, Steve, at the end, but I didn't, got to put it in.
Okay, is that like gospelaviation.com?
.org, yep.
.org, okay, very cool. Well, really cool what you're doing. Just, I mean, obviously both the flying bit and the humanitarian bit is really, really neat. So really appreciate you taking the time. Does anybody else have any other questions for DJ this evening? I think you just covered it all, probably, is what it is.
Put them all to sleep.
So now, when do you head back?
End of September.
And is that so? Is it similar? Is the seasons flipped with us, or?
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's flipped. So wintertime is right now. Wintertime is the best time to fly, mostly blue skies. And when I get back, I'm going to need a lot of practice because I'm going to be rusty. So I'm going to be back out there at that 3,000-foot grass strip practicing, and not thinking I'm invincible, trying to go into some of these harder strips. My hardest one I didn't talk about, but I wonder if I started damaging the TK1s on one of the landings at my hardest strip, and I haven't been back in there since, because it was over my head, and I didn't know it at the time. So yeah, so take it slow. And it might sound like I'm really reckless, but I was really trying to be safe through all this. I was applying the MAF principles, abort points, full takeoff briefings, knowing where I'm going to continue, the last point at which I can pull the power and stop, and knowing my committed point on landings. And all of that works really well if you follow it. It was the times when I was trying to, do more than I knew I should that I got in trouble.
So I got a question, and somebody else has this question too. They were asking a little bit about your airplane weight now, but I was curious too, in conjunction with that, is it considered experimental down there?
Yeah, it
So,
is.
and so because you're doing humanitarian aid and not a commercial thing, is that why you're able to use experimental?
Yeah. Yep, exactly. So we don't charge for anything we do. We don't charge for the medical work. We don't charge for the medevac flights. It's all based on donations. And so the Super Cub is great. It keeps the cost down, and it's not expensive to fly. Avgas is $2.50 a gallon. And yeah, so experimental has been fantastic there. That's one country you can do that.
So does that change your gross weights or anything?
No. This has heavy duty struts, but it's a stock Piper wing, and I'm using basically 1950 as my outside max. Any heavier than that, and it really just doesn't climb above 14,000. It just doesn't have any climb performance.
And what's your empty on that?
1160.
That's pretty good, given the size of the tires and all the other stuff you got going on there.
Yeah. Yeah. When Dan sold it to us, it was 1120 on 31s.
Right.
And we did a few things to lighten it, and then we also put more junk on it. So
do you have the stock 10-inch wheels, or are you using the Behringer wheels on there, the lighter wheels?
They're actually Greg Miller's experimental wheels. I got them from Chuck. He's PA 2022 or something like that out in the Midwest. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So with the tires on them. And
is that a stroked up 160 horse you've got in there, or is it a?
No, it's 9.5 to 1 0360.
Okay.
Yep. And that I think that's probably the minimum for what we're trying to do, unless you were a lot lighter, unless the plane could be a lot lighter, right? It's not the ultimate lightweight build, but it's pretty good. And with that engine, we get J3 performance. So.
Right. Well, very good. Well, DJ, thank you so much for this evening. We're getting a lot of great comments. I know we'll get some comments from folks as we go along too that get to watch it on YouTube. And best of luck to you in heading back home. And congratulations again on being a father again.
Oh, thank you.
And tell your wife to keep telling you maybe you ought to pay attention to that little voice in the back of your head, or she needs to be the little.
Cub.org, because I've learned a ton that I don't think I would have learned anywhere else on supercub.org, and the guys on there that are sharing about flying and about maintenance. It's amazing resource, and couldn't do it. I don't think I would be there without that resource all these years.
Well, great. That is awesome. Thank you. And thanks again for being here. Thanks everybody that hung around this evening. And I don't know what's happening next week yet, by the way. I've still got to figure that out. So, but stay tuned, as a friend of mine would say. So we'll see you later. Thanks, DJ. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Steve.
All righty. Good night, everybody.